Yes, thank you very much. And I would like to give a response to your lecture because ENSSER, through our Spanish member, we have done a request for access to information in Spain on GMO field releases. And we got the information, and then after another letter we got the real information. And we're going to try to do the same thing in Romania and Slovakia. So that seems to be a bit of challenge of language, but it worked, essentially. So I think you are right that people really need to use it. I'm not going to talk about this now. I'm going to talk about another very interesting topic, at least in my perspective and also in our perspective, about patents and risk research. Access to material, not information, but actually the material on which you would like to do research. I think that the topic of genetic engineering and biosafety, GMOs, is a topic on which we can discuss the larger issues, also in this case of testing democratic legitimacy. We have this very nice book of Les Levidoff and Susan Carr, GMO Food on Trial, which gives quite a lot of interesting views and also quotes about how the GM food debate really tackles with issues of democracy and control and access to information and food and materials. That also brought me to this topic. Just to inform you about the framework that a control through patents is the issue of intellectual property rights, especially patents. They give you a right to control access to this invention and to determine who can use it. That is in the nature of these rights. Every WTO member is then forced to allow patenting for GMOs by the provisions of this TRIPS article that says that members may exclude from patentability certain processes other than non-biological and microbiological processes. And this is exactly what genetic engineering does. It is microbiological processes is the transformation with agrobacterium, one of the fundamental methods, and the non-biological method is the famous gene gun. You shoot the DNA into the plant. And this is it's a non-biological process. And so the wording of the TRIPS agreement is especially useful to allow the patenting of GMOs. So every WTO member has to allow these patents. That comes with a certain effect in reality. Depending on your national patent laws, we had a huge public storm in the US in 2009 when actually the New York Times reported that crop scientists in the US complained officially to the Environmental Protection Agency that they are not able to use patented GE plants in their research in an independent way. And I found it quite astonishing. One of these researchers, Mr. Ostley, publicly said that in collaboration with the company of Syngenta, he was not allowed to publish certain negative effects he had found, and that Syngenta forbid him to allow to publish these results because the research material is under patent protection and he has no rights to use it as he wants to. That caused, as I said, quite a stood up in the US, although, of course, risk research with GE crops was ongoing since 15 years then. So that 15 years of research was already done under this whatever secrecy agreements, and nobody has complained, and now people really went into the public. In 2010, a big article in the Scientific American called that this restriction must end. So that was a pretty hard word, and again, industry reacted immediately. Nobody came to them before. The article in the Scientific American said that the user agreements have explicitly forbidden the use of seeds for any independent research. That is pretty strong language, and you can see when you read the article, it is full of a lot of very disturbing information that obviously research on GE risks has never been free and independent in the US before. That is what you can read from this article. And this is the research on which all approvals, of course, are based. And this is also the research which will be sent to the EU, and because they don't make new research when they want to approve a GM crop in the EU. The answer of the US biotech companies was an agreement that the research with commercially available seed products should be free. And you can read, and this is quite astonishing, that they talk about commercially available seed. They don't talk about seed that is still under development or in approval. So that this policy of the US biotech companies for the US circumstances says that they want to assure that the public sector research community is free to design robust protocols, that I might conclude that they until then were not free to design their own protocols, and that they also want to encourage and ensure that the public sector research community is free to publish findings with commercially available seed that everybody can buy. This policy does not talk about seeds that are still in approval and for which risk assessment would be essentially important, or even more important than for those seeds which are actually grown in the fields. So this policy from 2009 of the American Seed Trade Association is still not what we like to see, that the US patent law still allows massive research restrictions. And I think that just needs to be also known in the EU when our institutions rely on these data for product approval in the end. The statement, of course, does not bind patent holders. It's not a law. It's just a policy statement. You don't have a right on these clauses which are contained in the statement. And as I said, the statement only includes the crop seeds that are on the market. So I would conclude that independent research on crops under development is still not possible in the US. And of course, the data for risk assessment are also under full control of the patent holder, because that statement does not talk about data of this research, but just on the material, on the access to material. That then brought the question, of course, to us to answer what is the situation in Europe, and that also connects back to my remark yesterday. There is, of course, there are laws in Europe on this, but when we ask amongst our members, which were at that time mainly biosafety people and some other people from chemical industry, nobody knew. Well, they all said, "Oh, we get the seed more or less illegally, on the grey market. We could travel to the US and get a bag of seed." This is all not very satisfactory, and maybe not legal anyway. So we saw that the European patent law has this research exemption. Now you can read it in the law, and we found also that it's widely applied in drug regulatory research. It's a big issue, obviously, in testing drugs. it was, as said, almost unknown amongst these biosafety scientists that things like this exist. And then we ask ourselves, what are the implications of this risk, of this research exemption for our field of research? Is it the same as applied to other fields? And we asked Professor Dolder of the University of Basel to give us a legal opinion on this. And he confirmed what we already knew, that there is international legislation that opens the way for WTO members to provide such limited exceptions to this exclusive patent rights. That is dealt with very differently in the different countries of this world. So the Convention for the European Patent for the Common Market is a bit older convention, but they took it up, and so it says that the rights conferred by community patent shall not extend to acts done for experimental purposes relating to the subject matter of the patented invention. I worked a bit in this legal issues, so I'm not a lawyer, and that made me very suspicious. What actually does this mean? And in our legal opinion, we got the reply that this obviously had been drafted in this very, you can say it in a very general language to still allow countries to decide on national legislation how they actually want to implement this exemption and which research actually is then falling under the exemption. Because of course, and then we have a new legal proposal. I found a 2011 text for regulating the European patent system, and that still contains this research exemption. So I guess that when this enters into force, maybe in however years, we still have this research exemption in Europe. The legal opinion we got informed us in detail about all these legal background issues, about European national legislation and court cases, and informed us about a distinction that is actually made in national law, in Swiss law or in German law, that these laws and also judges and court cases make the distinction whether you do research on a patented subject or with the invention. And just to be very brief, if you do research with the invention, you like to develop it further. And you have a product and would like to make a new product out of this. This, of course, falls under the protection of the patent rights. So you are not allowed to use a patented product just to develop the product further without the consent of the patent holder. And this seems to be a right you cannot put under research exemptions. If you want to use this patented object like a GE seed, for example, to study how it behaves in the environment, without the intention to actually use the seed as a seed, or maybe to produce a new seed out of that, that obviously falls under the research exemptions. And Professor Dolder drafted this little table, also based on our information we gave him, and he said that, okay, so we see these different patent claims. You can have claims on the substance or on the seed, you can have claims on the process of production, and you can have claims on the use of this, for example, in agriculture. And we gave him three types of research, which are pretty common. That is first risk to human and animal health and environment, and then the whole question of more agriculture-related research, for example, delaying the development of resistance of weeds and insects, which has essentially nothing to do with the development of seed, but more or less with the use of these seeds in the system. And then, of course, of improvement of yields in agricultural practice, which comes pretty close to developing new seeds. And you see with the green, he told us that certain things like risk research would probably fall under this research exemption. There are several cases where the exemption seemed to be doubtful, and two which he has marked as not exempted, where it is pretty clear that if you want to work on improvement of yields, etc., that this research would not fall under the research exemption if the patent claims are on the process of production or on use in agriculture. So in our specific case, when we are interested in risk research, we have a good indication that we can use this research exemption. To my knowledge, this has never been done. At least not that the researchers engaged in such projects know about it. Maybe let's say there have been large biosafety projects of the German government with unapproved seeds. And there might have been agreements between the ministry and Monsanto. But this is something we are not aware of. Or at least we are not aware of at this time. So, this showed us that obviously there is a way to ask companies to allow access to seeds which are not on the market to do independent research. When the seeds are on the market, European law do not contain restrictions. So you may do research on the seeds as you want. So that is a very different situation to the US. That is also contained in this legal opinion. What it also says that this research exemption, it was assessed if it is an independent legal instrument, and we got the answer that, of course, you have no rights just to get this patented seed, yes, let's say for nothing, or you cannot force this company, really. The company still, or the patent holder still has to agree to it. You may use the research exemption to have the request, but of course the patent rights still would allow this company to agree, or I guess also to reject it, and then you might think about an appropriate answer if they reject access under the research exemption. This will bring us to maybe a new work. We're thinking about developing a comprehensive concept for a GM plant risk assessment, preferably based on the new EFSA environmental risk assessment guidance. That is sort of a official methodologies and also official schemes how you do risk assessment. So that is something which should be in a way a sort of approved research when we just talk about the Argentinian case again. So if you would like to follow this scheme which is suggested by EFSA, I think you cannot really do things very wrong. And we would like to ask the certain patent holder for access with reference, of course, to this research exemption. And of course we need to prepare if the access is rejected, that we of course need to do something in the public to inform people about that. I think this, at least for me and some of our members, will be a very interesting approach to follow in the next time. And we would also like to come into contact with people from the drug research field, where these kinds of research under research exemptions are obviously more common than in our field. Yes, thank you very much.